haven't taken account of what is a recess of. We've got a dessert problem around this place. Some of the notants that was formulated for the other medium of were mentioned here on this medium of. We've all been educated and more so served as the prison for us capable ones, while the mass amount of these agriculture spots of sheer numberness has been enjoying it and doing some kind of hayride. They receive so much free cash and simply on different forms of welfare. Well, the government's ignored to mention it. You guys need to visit. I'll show it's more, so give more indicator. This stuff is such a sick amount of anti-sex spray, whether recent and whether probable, whether there's a considerable amount of anti-sex spray. That's why the situation is, and it probably could be worse, because over here it can be some anti-sex sprays, and I myself probably been conditioned. They form an environment, so our guess bound to be conditioned. And what happened to the samurais anyways? Reason they're freezing, whether reason, whether mention, whether reason, whether mentions could be considered as transport, whether reason, whether transport from one medium to the here enough. Mike Tyson is constantly combated against it. That guy even dangerous. He might have some rape charges, but come on, man. I will give him free female to make this place more peaceful. How can we define today that someone who is peaceful is not really a great person? Why it has to be smart? This smart is just giant gimmickry, isn't it? Substitute with a bunch of nonsense and filled with terrorism. What is someone who is smart and cannot create? The smart is used for what? Stalking others. What's it going to result? And that's sort of a below average level, right? But whether above average in terms of greediness. Overall, aren't we sick and tired of whether the stuff gets persons tiring? There bound to be moments like such. We give up. Yet we still forgive our enemies. We tolerate and tolerate. These doesn't attain to reasons at all. And plus also, and what happened to the warrior class of Europe and East Asia? These two places, one of the reasons these places are so dampened right now, because we have all these agricultural spawns that insist they are us. They're not even living, be engineering itself for some kind of number-based brutal global conquest. This whole education system is now completely conquered by them, where creativity is not just suffocated accidentally, it's both and purposely inflicted onto. I myself probably served as a great example of such. And these even worked out some kind of method to combat livelihood, so they try to shun somebody to a ridiculous level for asking a simple question or visit someone with a sort of written, sort of out of this preset, this level, and this probably from what the minimalism that person's and whether probably from what the citizen's supposed to be operating of, whether operate upon. It's supposed to be a feeble demand that probably suitably portrays the whether reason, whether minor describes the level of the potency, whether the potentness. whole place is filled with creeps and shills and nasty nutheads. Like after we are combated against, and we have to fill various, have to be filled out various forms. Doesn't it seem now the whole grammar penalization league is just massive amount of camouflage? They just want our guys to comply. And some of the words such as you're doing this or etc. comes off whether as whether casual word, whether phrases of how to penalize. So and these exist because for a regular person, and it's often interpreted from actually the direct statement. Doing that is sort of okay, therefore they are okay. But terrorists giving compliment probably just as deadly as whether terrorism doing these terrorism attacks. Kind of the person out there is much radicalized, and validity thrust of others around them had been vicious. They force you to take some drinks with them and kind of as the manner this athletic is. I personally hired persons from Nigeria. I hired 200 soldiers, shipped them over there, gun all of us. Simply fucking too many, man. 500,000, that's almost like a tumor cancer, what it's doing for number-based global domination. Then times by 3, you have 1.5 million. Times by 3, you have 4.5 million. Times by 3, you have 13.5 million. Times by 3, you have probably 40.5 million. Times by 3, you have 121.5 million. That's still not even 5% of this global amounts. In World War II, some of the countries had, whether regions of had 5 countries, whether region, whether 5% gone, including injured, whether reason, whether casualties, whether reason, whether probable for whether conventional war, they live, for whether reason, whether they live. 5%, 3 to 4 to reach to 30%, not 6 times. And double that, 60%, still not even remotely close. This whole place is one fucked up area. The water reason we don't have samurais anymore. They've been murdered. As if our guys don't want to be more active and want more joy. You go for joy, try to go for joy in sort of a modernity environment. Thank goodness we still have some fellows around in this region, regions here. Some other places away from, not doesn't have to be liberalism. Liberalism activates this passive-aggressive agriculture response to start using the excuse. Sometimes they be medicated to be this way. They are freaks, they are dysfunction. They should still be tolerated against. That's a sort of approach of have reasonable, whether normal or regular folks towards whether reason, whether probable, from whether minor rise, from whether of. Nazis keeps using reason for infliction, and on these sort of the relentless locusts that excel over all other locusts. And we notice that if by the track record, flies are not here to attack us. Flies might tell you to make your room more spacious. He might even be a friend. So then what has been going on, right? Then how come those ordinary people starts to be scared when there are some kind of minor bugs around? What kind of level of freakishness is that? I personally bite them. It's hijacked corpses. Might be documented. Any citizen that got hold of it that opposes is a giant moron. Is a giant idiotic freak. And I personally assassinated. My forces is the strongest when the mightiest ruler of here, they wanna fuss around, even if I'm gonna come back and make sure to gas each of these into these perpetual dense chambers, as tested by the science, can exterminate these. Bring on the Zerg technology and give them some conditional assistance, whether additional warfare, yet we still have enough nuclear bombs to wipe those twice and more, and probably increase so as we speak. Well, whether reason just I, the mightiest of all, speak. Reason therefore, whether reason therefore, whether it specifically of whether it's whether proper for whether specifically of a rhetorical expression. That's something the Nazis will want to cooperate and understand. Regular verb words are not to provide words. It could be Nazi cooperate and Nazi understand. You bunch of little mental fussy fills that can't even ever invent or reinvent. Suppose those combined together with current amount of access, they still can't even produce a single productivity. Can't even produce proper hate. That's a problem with those. We sort of, suppose it was evil forces, that'd be so much better. Not to the point that everyone's sort of dampened. And the stuff have to go into sort of this realism data somehow so much. How come? Could it just be as stuff happens and have it do much more, and with this force, whether much more this increased need to produce to literal format? Living forms are reasonable, and we could activate them to be more reasonable because of whether they are organic compound, whether entities or whether creatures of whether they are organic creatures of int. A person can be as smart as wild they get, even sometimes they're sort of IQ 0, and there's seeing heart involved, and the person with the right serial ID, he would register right, and the stuff would come. That's this way. They cannot be sort of enforced against. It's almost of a match, and after the match, then the person's stating it's happened, and sometimes maybe interpreted whether as if from others, whether it's own making that sort of is own making, but not sort of from noticing this and therefore could act upon that sort of thing. Whether another sort of type of whether another sort of aberrative more suitable from whether reason whether a bit of more suitable from whether reason whether a bit more better. Would the Nazis still evaluate to the recent mentions? The Nazis will probably still evaluate. What a bunch of freaks, right? Check out the damages they have caused. Better to not know. Right? And sort of abandon and go, who cares over it, because the weather is the weather board race, the weather is the weather board. That have to be a know-it-all. That sort of is a know-it-all. What's the point of being know-it-all? To do what? Life is sort of, the word is human beings, not human knowings. We should be stating every sentence with sort of regret. This is being a cultural level contamination. Suppose I being out of it, but our folks be much more within this. Not that the matrix can be problematic. Because socials tend to be two-way interaction. Don't have to explain stuff. Like, the stuff are new. While all these hideous abomination stuff are, whether spillage are common. The level of viciousness and the dramatism. Perhaps this instantly connects to the suspicious notices of those absurd level of unsupportedness, whether non-athleticity or whether shortage of athleticity. Indeed, there are whether they are quite whether they're probable kind of as evidence of and such amount of violence, whether it's there or whether probably from whether minor is vile. Being whether it's whether probable for whether it's there or whether vile entity is. So sort of not so much whether jam it or whether leave it, because we have the previous modes coming back. Maybe as for discussion, whether it's whether for presentation, whether discussion, whether it's whether for discussion, and whether it's the whether for discussion purpose, and whether probable for presentation purpose, also for whether it's there, whether for discussion purpose, and whether also presentation purpose.